project that I started working on a couple months ago, and before that, this really focuses on, well, I'll get into focus here in a second. I hadn't had a chance to do a lot of contact with patients here in the specialty area, so this taught me a lot around the specialty area. I work at the Center for Innovation, and we have a process that we follow where we spend some time really kind of understanding patient needs, user needs around the problem, and from there we scope our opportunity. Often we'll have people come to us from Mayo Clinic and they'll say, I'd like you to work on this, fix this problem. And we'll go and we'll talk to patients and we'll say, actually this is only part of the problem, where actually the problem is this kind of problem. And so that process that we're in that's where we are right now with the Itinerary Project. We're in the discovery phase. We're really trying to understand what it means. And when we talk about itinerary, we're talking about how Mayo Clinic lines up patients' appointments. And oftentimes, when you think about traveling, you get an itinerary, you're going to be here, 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 and here. So the national patients, when we do that for them, that itinerary is really important for them because they're spending time and money traveling here, staying here, and so they want to be really sensitive to making sure that they're figuring out their needs. So the objective of our project is really to reframe how we think about itinerary, and really to do that from the patient perspective, because certainly we have kind of a business perspective and we have things that we believe about how patients want things and do things, and we try and deliver on that, but this is really, let's hear the patient's voice. And we wanted to get a broad representation of all Mayo Clinic patients. So you can see over there, phase 1 is complete, and that was really focusing on the national patient group, people that traveled over 2 hours to come to Mayo Clinic. And so we had people that traveled anywhere from 199 miles all the way to like nearly Louisiana and Washington D.C. and we I'll show you that here in a second. But phase 2 is really underway right now, and that's to balance out what we heard from national patients with what we hear from patients that are more local to us here. And it's really about patients that are coming to the specialty practice. So I imagine a lot of, and I'll talk to you here about this in a second, imagine, but at this point, that a lot of you are living locally, you've been here for some amount of time, and when you think about Mayo Clinic, there's some idea of primary care mixed into that as well as specialty care. And so when we talk about my project tonight, I'd really like to have you think about the Mayo Clinic Rochester specialty practice, because that's where we need to balance things out with those national patients. The concern is far less with the primary care kind of needs that we may have and be satisfying locally. So I'll give you just an overview of some of the things that we learned with the first phase of the project, and I kind of mentioned where people were coming from. Here's a map of all the people that we talked to. We talked to, as you can see here, we talked to 32 patients, and then we did a record review of 100 patients to augment that. And so here's the people that we got. And so this was somewhat random, somewhat self-selected on who we talked to, but there's a pretty good mix here of people that traveled from afar, and those people with the blue lines between Rochester and their home, that is, those are flights, and then the people that have the green squiggly line, those are people that drove. And so you see there's a lot of people that are coming from pretty local, and it tends to be that a lot of those people are actually people that come kind of every year, and they know what they need, and they have doctors here, so it's almost like they're kind of doing their primary care here. They're the kind of the executive patients, or as kind of we talked to the annual well patients, people that don't have anything seriously wrong with them. There's some other ones mixed in with that, but that generally kind of makes up that immediate circle kind of that you see around that kind of 2 to 3 hour circle or 4 hour circle around Rochester. And this was as an example of one of the visualizations that we put together to kind of understand what the patient's experience was like, at least from the places they went, the people they stayed in, saw and how close we were able to get their appointments. So you can see here, you can't really read it, but the blue dots represent consultations. That's when they were referred to see a doctor, and the doctor had a conversation, examined them, and the black are other appointments and tests that they had done. The open circles, or the blue circles with the white on the inside, are appointments that were not seen at that date and time. And oftentimes there's an arrow indicating where that appointment moved to, like the red arrows indicate, over here on the right, they moved in. So someone was doing a lot of work to get these appointments in for this patient. So this is a patient that reflects, I think, what Mayo Clinic would like to always be able to provide for the national patients, at least. They had, you can see they had 29 appointments, and they got them all done within essentially 8 days. There's that one kind of outstanding appointment that, for some reason they didn't try and move that. But they did a really good job. It just so happens that this patient, you got a lot of special touches and care that we don't offer to all of our patients. So they're unique in that way, in that they had a couple of doctors looking out for them and asking favors. But this is really what we would hope to be able to offer to all patients, so that they can, one, get their answers quickly, but also save themselves the cost of staying longer, if possible. So we talked to, like I said, the 32 patients, and then there was a couple patients that were really interesting, and they had, in that they had to make a decision around whether they were going to stay or they were going to go. And I got to have conversations with them, and here's kind of what we call a web diagram. And if you look at, to interpret it, you look at the pink here, this forms the outline of a shape. And the bigger the shape, the more likely they would stay for that last appointment. So this yellow person, this 67-year-old male from Dakota Dunes, was an executive patient, and they had one appointment that wasn't very important. It wasn't a big, impacting him very deeply. If he stayed, he was going to miss a football game, which was important for him, and his grandkids had something going on. And he was driving, so he had a lot of flexibility, and there's a point in here, it's hidden underneath one of the other lines, in that he only was staying for one appointment. The itinerary density of that, around that one appointment, was just that one appointment, and so he wasn't getting a big bang for the buck for staying. And then his economic cost was low he might have actually been higher, but this is a little objective. But it's essentially to say, the people that have a lot of things that they're kind of considering are going to be more likely to stay. This yellow person left. This green person also left. This orange person, outlined here, didn't leave. They stayed for the appointment. So these are some of the things that we need to be considering when these patients are making decisions. And actually, I think this is one of the few things that kind of ports over to when we think about the local patients and how we're scheduling for them, because these are things that are important for everybody as we're making appointments. So as we talk to the local patients, we'll see how they're playing out. Another thing we kind of identify is there's some kind of types around people and their needs and behaviors around their appointments. So there's a group of people, like I mentioned before, the annual well people who come. They have their appointments often pre-scheduled, scheduled before they get there. There's not a lot of surprises, and so they're staying for a short time. There's a couple others that had, like that one I showed you. She kind of falls under the many previously known problems, where she doesn't come often, but she shared everything that she had and didn't hold everything back, and we got some good pre-scheduling for them. Second opinion, procedural treatment. These often had very just focused things that they were looking for. And I think that maybe some of when I talk to you guys, we'll see some of that a lot of times you're in primary care, you're doing fairly well, fairly healthy, and you just have to pop in every once in a while for a specialized question. And so that's how a lot of these people were, is that they're actually pretty well, they just have one kind of focused question that their specialists at home weren't able to handle. The specialized check-in, these are people that are flying and they have just one issue, like the two we talked to were heart valve repair patients who would come every year for just that one thing, to check on their heart. A couple other ones, surprise concerns. This is something that we don't know about somebody coming in, but they come and they have some imaging and all of a sudden they find, I've got what? And this kind of puts them in a tailspin, and they try and do as much as they can with the time they have here, but because it's not pre-scheduled, it wasn't known before, those folks tend to have less dense, a little bit longer kind of concerns. And then there's kind of the classic Mayo case where they don't have a diagnosis coming in, and we give them the full workup, and those people can range from short to long. A couple of people have, and maybe you guys can confirm this, talk about this if you are aware of it, is there's people that try and get appointments and they don't get in, and they try and get appointments and they don't get in, and finally they get an appointment for something, but they think that if they share more that they'll be denied again. So once they get here, they'll say, oh, well, I'll just ask for to see these other specialties once I get here. And so those kind of turn into longer, less dense ones because they have a lot of issues that they didn't share in advance. And then in this group we had one person that kind of was like a local national. They were here, but kind of they had an experience much like they were national, where they were having a lot of acute things taken care of, which you think normally happens for the local folks. A couple of, I'm going to fly through these real quick because I have some questions and discussion I want to have with you. But some key insights. One of the things that we learned is that patients really can be our partners in creating condensed itineraries for themselves. That it's not completely up to us to do that, to the Mayo Clinic institution, but that we have a couple things that enable patients to make their itineraries work for them, including one is the checker process. Also, when people are making decisions about how long they're going to stay, if we can share with them in advance as much of their itinerary as we know, that will enable them to make plans that are appropriate. Because otherwise, I think you may agree with this. You may have felt this in your own life. When we are told you could have a very good outcome or a very bad outcome, we naturally like to think, oh, I'm going to be one of those people that has a very good outcome, so I'm just going to plan to be there for a day, right? Or I'm just going to plan to be for 3 days, not 7 days. So we need to give them as much information as possible so that they can plan accordingly. People really praise Mayo Clinic for its agility, and again, I'd like to hear your thoughts on this, that they're able to work with me and flex with me to get done what I need to have done. And then another thing is that there tended to be a little bit of a where you come in your care cycle kind of determines how long you're going to be here. So if you're really here, you don't know what you have, you're going to spend a lot of time or more time coming to the point where, oh yeah, now I really know what I have, and then there's the second part where, okay, well now what do we do to take care of that? So where someone falls, someone may have done a lot of work back home and seen a lot of specialists, and so they really just are looking for that second opinion, that confirmation, or they've also seen a lot of people, but nobody's been able to give them a diagnosis they're confident in, and they'll be closer to that kind of longer itinerary. And then the last one, people just want to feel like their time is well used. And so for some people that means having a really condensed back-to-back schedule. For others, that may mean that I am working around some of the other things that I want to do in the area, again, which may reflect a little bit more the local patient. So what does that mean for the local patient to have time, their time well used? So here's the discussion I wanted to have. This is a first question. So I want you to read through these and think about where you guys personally fall within these 5 categories. There's 4 categories, but I'm leaving another because I really hope that there's some other in here because I don't want to just make an assumption yet. I haven't talked to that many local patients yet. So 1, I get all my care there at the specialty clinic, and I don't really see a primary care provider. I'm an established patient in specialty care for a couple of conditions. You know, I see my endocrinologist, I see my pulmonologist, whoever it might be. I get most of my care in primary care, and I pop into specialty care every now and then, maybe for surgeries or unique tests. And 4, I don't really ever come to the specialty practice at Mayo Clinic. Or 5, other. So, who's a number 1? Any number 1s out there?
That is, I get all my care.
Yeah, I get all my care there at the specialty clinic. And you don't go to primary care? All right. I'd like make sure I want to hear your voice. I'm an established patient in specialty care for a couple of conditions. Number 2. Any of those?
Even though you might see.
Even though you still see, primary care.
For a couple of conditions. What if it's more than a couple?
Let's see. Yeah, that's okay. You can be a number 2.
So how many are 2s?
So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. All right. And then 3, I get most of my care in primary care and pop into specialty care every now and again. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4.
We get all our stuff
5. You get what?
here. We get primary and all the specialists.
Uh,
I don't know what the difference is between that and like 2 and 3.
maybe there's no difference. I'm still working on these.
That should be combined.
All right, so we combine those. Then I don't ever come to the grade. I don't ever come to the grade buildings.
I think you mean for number 2, you're an established primary care patient, but you have specialty care for a chronic condition.
Yes, I do.
As opposed to number 3, where you have specialty care, I came up with something, got it taken out, and now I'm done.
Yeah, that's what I'm talking about. Yeah, so I have a test done or I have a surgery and then I'm really back out in primary care. So do we want to change our answers at all?
I guess, I don't know which is which in terms of most of the other people. Maybe we should do it again.
All right, so 1, I get all my care. I don't really have primary care. We had a 1 there. Are you still a 1?
Yeah.
Okay. I am an established patient in specialty care for 1 to many conditions.
As well as primary.
And primary care, yeah. So we got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. Good. I get most of my care in primary care and pop into specialty care every now and again when you just have a short issue. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5.
And that's me. I'm 6.
Okay, Fran 6. Oh, my computer went away.
I'm writing it down.
Thank you.
What about the others? You want to know who are the others? Yeah, well, who are the others?
I don't ever come into the big gray buildings for specialty care. Do we have any of those?
Anybody so healthy they never see a doctor? Raise your hand.
Well, for specialty care, I'm in that number 4 category. I unfortunately haven't had
And when you turn
specialty
50,
care
you
needs.
start going into the great buildings.
So no others out there, right? Is there any others? Any that I didn't really capture?
I guess I don't understand what you're saying.
I just want to know who my audience is a little bit.
No, but I don't know what another would be.
Oh, that's what we're asking you guys.
Yeah, I'm just.
How else do you
Is there anybody that just doesn't feel like one of these kind of areas represents their relationship with specialty care?
Number 5 would be somebody that uses the emergency room for their care.
Primary care doctors, but has several different specialty issues, not just a couple of conditions, but sees a bunch of them.
Okay.
The way it's worded, it makes it seem like you don't fit into that. But the way you described it fits the way it's worded. Like I would be, number 5 if you didn't clarify that.
Yeah, so I guess it's more just forget about the couple of, and I'm establishing patients in specialty care for 1 to many conditions. Yeah. Your thought?
Molly had something about 5 and I do too.
Can you say that one more time?
Number 5, I would say the other would be people that are seeking primary care through the emergency room. That
Oh,
would be-
yeah, there is that group, isn't there?
That would be
Yeah,
those,
or specialty care,
They
yeah.
don't have a primary, so they just seek it through the ER.
And I have one too. People who sign up for the biomed, whatever they call them, the research categories.
Oh,
A
yeah.
lot of people do that so that they get their blood pressure done and things like that.
Yeah, good. Kind of
So they get in like
the
clinical
research.
trials?
Yeah.
Yes,
Yeah.
they're in trials and
Yeah, for research.
research things.
All right, so here's the real meat of the discussion. Sorry that took so long. One, what's the difference between getting an appointment in Mayo Clinic specialty practice versus getting one in Mayo Clinic primary care? You guys feel a difference at all?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
just as easy to make.
Yeah, is it just as easy?
No,
It depends on the department. There's some departments that sort of, once you're established there, you can book, you can go over and over again. An example of that is ophthalmology, where once you're referred and once you have a condition, you can go over and over again. And there's some other departments where they kind of want a referral from primary care each and every time you go there, even if you're sort of a chronic person. And it just varies. An example of that would be physiology, physical medicine, where basically they kind of want the primary care guy in person. Even if you've been there 10 times, they still want it to the left for physical therapy. No, you can't self-refer yourself for that. You have to always go to the primary care for that.
Yeah.
So it's very different.
Do I need to repeat this, or is it?
yes, please.
The audio will pick up.
Okay, good. Good, thank you. What else?
Well, for me, I've got eye issues, and I do have a primary, and so if I have, like, say, a cold or something, well, I mean, I've been my primary so long that when I get a cold, I get a cough, and I get a wheeze. And so then now I just call them and say, I've got the cold, cough, and wheeze, you know, I need XXX medicine, and then he prescribes it. But then with the specialty care, like I said, when I have eye issues, I do have regular appointments to see my, specialty eye doctor, but then sometimes if I have issues in between that, I mean, I have, you know, obviously we would have an appointment set up, but sometimes I'll end up calling, but first I'll call their appointment and say, you know, can I get in to see Dr. So-and-so? And then I say, oh, I'm sorry, you don't look up today, you know, and then at that point I'll say, okay, thank you, and then I'll dial the secretary. And I'll say, hi, it's me again, I've got issues, and she'll say, okay, I'll see what I can do. You know, or in another case, like the secretary was out, and then I ended up like with a triage nurse, and then she's like, well, you know, what about this here? Are you experiencing this here? You know, and then they were able to do something for me.
Mhm.
It is slightly different depending on what a person has going on.
Got it.
But it almost sounds like, listening to you, you already have like a system in place.
Oh,
Like,
yeah.
if you don't get one answer from one person, you know someone else to call, and that's what that definitely sounded like.
Yeah, and then and to that point too, the one point my doctor actually gave me his home phone number. And then so one time I was in, well, Adams was like 40 miles away, and I felt an eye issue coming on. And so this was like, I don't know, 5:30 in the morning, called him at home, and I said, you know, I'm coming in. You know, so then when he was warm, and then by the time I got here, you know, then I was open. So it was one of those odd things that obviously, you know, would not expect to do that again, you know, but because I needed to have him to do it, otherwise they're blaming the whole thing to somebody else, and then sometimes other people are like, well, I'm not sure if this will do it, because they want to do their own thing. You know, if you manage me, so I was like, no, you need to do A, B, and C. 'cause
They know
this is
you.
for me.
And you have a relationship.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
Great. Yeah, in the back.
I have, I would be a number 2 as established with
Uh-huh.
cardiology, but I also have a primary and stuff. And over the years, if I go through my primary, I can get an appointment faster seeing the same doctor that I want, than unless I call cardiology.
Oh, okay.
So I always go through primary, and he makes a note in my record that he's referring me, but first he finds out what's wrong with me. Maybe he'll just email and then come back with the information. But generally, I can get a faster appointment if I go through primary.
Got it, yeah.
Sometimes with number, are those both question ones, or you want to answer both now?
Yeah.
No, somehow the numbering changed between when I made this and when I send it.
Another issue that comes up sometimes, if you develop sort of an urgent kind of care situation, sometimes you're sort of torn between calling cardiology and calling your primary care. If they don't have a spot, they'll say go to the emergency room. But the problem is that Medicare, a lot of insurance companies don't want you to go to the emergency room unless you're actually having an emergency, not just because you're having a situation where you might be bleeding slightly, or you might have some symptom that might be troublesome. So you basically have to keep calling until you get somebody who agrees to see you. But it's not as easy as it is in some other places where you can just have a primary care doctor somehow is more accessible, where you can just get an appointment somehow, usually within a day. But here, you kind of have to call different places to find somebody who will, put you in there.
Yeah.
I think one of the problems with that is between Mayo and other places is that Mayo is the only institution I've ever been. I've been involved with a lot of other places too, where you have to have an appointment within 3 months. Most institutions will look at 4 months, 5 months, 6 months, so it levels the playing field, so you don't have that. You don't have everything clustered. So like a local person tries to get an appointment and have all these people from outside who are booked in 3 months because they won't book them for 4 months, 5 months, and 6 months. There's less available spots available within that cycle, the new urgent care kind of stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Everybody squeezed into that 3-month cycle.
Yeah, and that's really what we're trying to keep in balance. We want to optimize for those people that are traveling, but also want to make sure that we're taking care of the local needs. You had a thought?
I have 2 things. One, some primary now are making you talk to the nurse, and you spend 10 minutes describing all this stuff to the nurse, and sometimes it's things you prefer not to, before you can even get an appointment in primary care.
Mm-hmm.
It just depends on the day and the time. And that's one of the things, I just lost the thought the other one.
It'll come back.
There's also an issue with what happens if you want to see a specific doctor. There are some appointment people who want you to take anybody who happens to be available, and that in most other institutions they will allow you to book for Dr. Smith, and they won't even suggest you necessarily that you see Dr. Jones. They'll just say whoever you want to see, and they just put you on the calendar. It won't be where they try to manage your expectations as far as which doctor you see. And I think that's very different from here and from some, and I can give you a list of other institutions if you like, but I'm just saying, where they basically, you can call in a doctor's secretary, specialist secretary, and just book with that person. Rather than
You can get the doctor of choice here
Right,
easier
so
than
like
somewhere else.
urology, if you use those fields, for example, it's very hard necessarily to get a specific person if you particularly prefer one. In other institutions, that's no issue. And so they try to manage, the load that way, which is, I think, somewhat problematic sometimes. But that's,
I think for me personally, it's been easier to get to specialty care than primary care. But primary care is where the clinic wants you. But if you're not having a once a year or year and a half appointment and something comes up, you appointment secretary, then you have a nurse call you back, and finally you find out that you can't see your particular doctor, but they will give you another doctor to see if they feel it's crucial or semi-crucial.
Yeah.
Frustrating.
Yeah, it is.
right, so the issue becomes continuity of care, like when you see
Mm-hmm.
different providers, not only primary care, but even in specialty care. If you're not seeing the same provider over a course of time, they don't know you, so you have to they have to get to know you at every visit, which I think sort of diminishes the effectiveness of the care if you're constant. I know they have notes, but it's not the same thing as
Right.
meeting with the same person over the same amount of time. And they don't have that many slots for the providers because they're the way they look. So they only have certain slots, and they try to, when you have a problem, both in primary care and specialty, they usually give you somebody else. But the problem is that somebody else doesn't know you, and it's harder for them to sort of catch up. I think.
Yeah.
I remember my other question. And I've heard lots of complaints about this. You do an appointment with a specialty, and maybe it's 4 months down the line. And they'll say, okay, but you can call back, and you can call 2 or 3 times a day. And they tell you to do this. and they might be able to give you an appointment sooner. So every day you call 2 or 3 times, and finally you get in when you really wanted to get in, but that's not fair. Not fair to anybody.
To have to call multiple times?
Yeah, and they tell you that it's okay to call 4 times a day if you want to.
Yeah.
They do tell you that.
How many people have had that experience? Calling multiple times?
Show of hands again.
Or the other thing, you can call and they say, please hold, and then they keep saying every minute for 25 minutes, your call is important. Call history.
That's right. I'll have to get them to change the recording. Your call isn't very important to us, but please stay on the line. So I feel like I've gotten my next set of questions answered really well through just that first prompt, and you guys have been really great. So I asked about kind of where you fall as far as your relationship with the specialty practice, and just real quick, I heard you were a little bit further away. Can you guys just kind of tell me a little bit how far you guys are coming from?
I live in Rochester.
Oh, okay.
But my parents lived in Adams.
Oh, okay, got it. Is there anybody else, or anybody that lives outside of Rochester that's here?
Well, I've lived in Michigan for 45 years, but I just moved here.
Oh, okay, great. And anybody else?
I drive all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, Fran. All right, well, I really appreciate your time, and thanks, Fran, for letting me on the program.
Anytime. You have great
So,
products and great.
when will we get a new revised system, do you think?
If Matt does anything to do it.
It'll be a long time. I'm a slow guy. It's it's not within my control. Really, I'm really trying to bubble up what I think the opportunities are. I think that we have recently uncovered something I think that's pretty important. In fact, how prevalent, at least for national patients, the checking system is. Have you guys heard of the? You probably have heard of the checking system. Checker. Yeah. And how.
Standby patient.
We just did a thing that showed about 20% of all the national patients that come in a month do that checking process where they essentially stand by to get an appointment, kind of like you fly standby. And that probably isn't the most desirable, as is the kind of the need to call multiple times a day. So there's a couple of things that hopefully we can address, at least in the shorter term. We may not overhaul the whole system, but hopefully we can address that.
Yeah, the checker system is, I think, is a real problem for people who have somewhat busy lives, because basically when they tell you that, they actually expect you to sit there from 10 o'clock in the morning until 6.
Yeah.
It's like you have nothing else to do. Maybe if you're from Acton Town, I could see that working, because you're here daily to get the appointment, so I could see them doing it, but the people who live in Rochester, that's a real burden.
Who here has been a checker for an appointment? You have?
My mom lived 6 hours away and we couldn't get into one appointment for 3 months. We came at 7, waited all morning, and they said, why don't you just go take lunch and come back in the afternoon? We waited all afternoon, and then 4:30 they came and called us. And so we got to see it.
So that was for your mom's appointment?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it was worth it to us because she wasn't gonna come back in 3 months.
Yeah. Yeah, good.
This
That's
is
it, yeah.
It's
Thank you.
7:06.
Yeah.
I'm just gonna ask all of